Welcome to episode 9 of our series of Duties of the Heart, and in this episode we're going to deal with chapter 8 of the first gate, the gate of the unity of God, and Rabbi Bachya continues with his reasoned arguments for the unity of God. And in this chapter we're going to deal with the distinction between true and absolute unity and conventional unity. And I'm going to introduce here, because this is a very highly technical subject, I'm going to introduce the commentary of Rabbi Chovot HaLevavot, an 18th century rabbi who wrote the commentary on this, on Chovot HaLevavot. Chovot HaLevavot is the title of his commentary, and also Rabbi Chaim Avron HaKohen, also 18th century rabbi, who wrote Pas Lechem, which is another excellent commentary on duties of the heart. So I'll introduce both of them within this episode. So let's begin. Rabbi Bachya starts. The term one is derived from the concept of unity. The term is used in two senses. One of them is incidental, which is the conventional unity, whilst the second is in essence and enduring, and this is true of absolute unity. Now, Chovot HaLevavot comments on the concept of incidental unity. So, for example, one man does not have absolute unity due to his being joined and composite of many parts, limbs, for example. But he has some unity when you relate him to two people, but not obviously like God's absolute unity. And Rabbi Bachya continues. Incidental unity subdivides into two divisions. In one of these, the character of multitude, collectivity, and aggregation is apparent in it, such as one genus, which includes many species, or like one species, which includes many individuals, and like one man, which is comprised of many parts, or one army, which includes many men. Or, like we say, one hin, or a measure, or one rova, a measure, or one liter, that's also a measure, which contains smaller measures, each of which is also called one. Every one of these things we mentioned are called one, conventionally, because the things included under the one name are alike. Every one of them may also be called plural, since it includes many things which, when separated and isolated, will each be called one. Unity in all these matters we mentioned is incidental, or mikra. Each is a unit from one perspective and plural from another aspect. The second division of incidental unity is the unity attributed to a single individual, who, though seemingly not plural and not a collection of several things, yet is essentially plural, being composed of matter and form, essence and incident, susceptible to creation and destruction, division and combination, separation and association, change and variation. So plurality must be attributed to anything for which any of these things we mentioned to applies, for they are contradictory to unity. Unity ascribed to anything essentially plural and variable in any way is undoubtedly mikra, or incidental property. It is unity conventionally, but not in a true sense. Strive to understand this. And Pas Lechem comments on that previous statement of it is susceptible to creation and destruction. He writes, if so, it changes from one form to another, since it goes through many forms in its formation, and likewise in its destruction, until it ceases completely, as is known. Its formation is not completed suddenly in one instant. Likewise, its destruction does not occur suddenly without stages, one form to another. Hence, it is correct to ascribe to it plurality, since it necessarily has a base kibul, an ability to receive all of its potential stages. Understand this. And Rabbi Bachya continues, true absolute unity is also of two kinds. The first in abstract thought and the second in actual reality. The abstract thought version is numerical unity, namely the root and beginning of all numbers. It is a sign and symbol of a beginning unprecedented by any other beginning. For every true beginning is termed one. As for example, there was an evening and there was morning one day. This is from Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 5. Instead of saying the first day, the verse uses the term one day, because the term one refers to any beginning unprecedented by any other beginning. When repeated, it is called the second, and when repeated again, it is called the third, and so on until the number 10, or 100, or 1,000, which are also units of new series, and so on to infinity. So Rabbi Avraham HaKohen, who wrote the Pas Lechem, he comments on this and says, and remarks on Rabbeinu Bachya. He says, in his fine words, he incidentally answered the question of Rashi in Bereshit chapter 1 verse 5, who asked, according to the order of creation, the verse should have said first day, but according to the author's words, the intent of the verse was to teach on absolute creation, which was the beginning of everything, including time. And Rabbi Yisrael Halevi of Chovot HaLevavot also comments on this, and he says, the one with which we count some number is itself not really a number, because a number is basically the grouping together of matters. And also one never makes plurality. As you say, 1 multiplied by 1, 1 multiplied by 2, everything remains unchanged, unlike the number 2 and above, which always multiplies over, since 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, 2 by 3 is 6, and similarly for all numbers. Therefore 1 is only the foundation of numbers and the sign of the beginning. There is nothing truly one besides God. If so, perhaps this term was borrowed to refer to a beginning without prior beginning. Likewise, the Midrash Bereshit Rabbah says, and I quote, the verse did not say the first day, but rather day one, to teach the unity of God. And Rabbi Bachya continues, therefore, the definition of number is that it is the sum of units. The reason I call it abstract thought is because the notion of number is not perceived by the physical senses. Rather, it is grasped only in thought. It is the numbered object. For example, eggs or nuts alone, which is perceptible to the 5 senses or by some of them. So Pas Lechem comments on this idea to be perceptible to the 5 senses or by some of them, and he says some things are perceptible to all the senses. For example, a goat has an appearance perceived by the sense of sight, a sound perceived by hearing, a taste when eating its meat, an odour by the sense of smell, and a texture to the sense of touch. Some things are perceived only by some senses, such as an apple, which is not perceived by the sense of hearing. A rock is perceived only by sight and touch. And Rabbi Bachya continues, the second kind of true unity exists actually. It is that which is neither plural nor susceptible to change and variation, and is not described by any of the corporeal attributes, and is not subject to creation, destruction, or end. It does not move from place to place or waver, does not resemble anything, nor does anything resemble it, and it is not associated with anything. It is from all possible perspectives true unity and the root of everything plural. For as we have already pointed out, unity is the cause of plurality. And Chovot HaLevavot quotes comments on the statement does not resemble anything, he says that he, referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, has no comparison whatsoever to any of his creations. For example, for one grain of sand versus the universe and everything in it, even though this is extremely tiny and this is extremely big, nevertheless there is a comparison between the two and a shared characteristic, and the difference between them is only size. But relative to him, referring to God, one cannot make any comparisons by any trait or measure, just like one cannot compare a voice to a picture. And Rabbi Bachya continues, the true unity has neither beginning nor finiteness, because anything which has a beginning or finiteness necessarily must be subject to origination and destruction, and anything subject to these is also subject to change, and change is inconsistent with unity. Therefore, it would be more than one, since it had existed as one thing and then changed into a different thing. And this necessarily implies plurality. And Chovot HaLevavot comments on this, and I quote, a thing which changes must have two powers, namely the power that it is now, and power for that which has the potential to become. And this contradicts unity. Rabbi Bachya continues, similarity is also an incidental property, or mikra, in anything which is similar to something else, and whatever has an incidental property is plural. But absolute unity in its glorious essence is not subject to any incidental properties whatsoever in any respect. If one will claim that the quality of unity is itself an incidental property in the absolute one, we will answer as follows. The ascribing of true unity is intended to express the exclusion of multitude and plurality. When we describe him as one, we mean only the negation of any multitude or plurality. But the true unity cannot be described by any attribute that would connote in his glorious essence any plurality, change, or variation. With this, we have completed our words regarding the true unity and relative unity. Note it well. And Paslechem just concludes this with a little bit of commentary, and he says, we are not ascribing to him unity, just negating the opposite, namely plurality. Likewise, the intent for any attributes we ascribe to him, such as living, wise, powerful, is only to negate the opposite. And that concludes chapter 8, and we will continue with chapter 9 next episode.